We are almost a month into the big 2026, and one of the most asked questions I've been getting in streams lately is new players wondering what they should be running for their first playthrough. Now, there are some fantastic leveling guides out there already, and some builds like Contagion, Essence Drain that have really stood the test of time over the past year since the game launched. However, what I've got today is a nice little leveling Mercenary build that allowed me to clear Acts 1 through 4 in just a few hours, and just, a little minor flex, I cleared everything on hardcore for this character, which speaks to the ad clear and survivability you'll be getting from this build. Now, my chat said this doesn't count as an Act 4 clear, but I'll let you guys decide that.
Oh my god, bro.
Anyways, I'll be walking you through each act and what skills, support, and spirit gem swaps I was making, as well as some of the gear you should be looking out for as you progress. I'm also aware that Oil Grenade Merc is just wildly popular right now. I mean, have you seen it? But this is just like an off-meta option that I was still having good success with. And if you don't want to listen to me for 10 plus minutes, that's okay. You can indulge yourself in the Mobalytics link in the description. Without further ado, let's get into it. Now, after spawning in, naked and afraid on the beach, and dealing with Shrek.
What are you doing in my swamp?
We'll go ahead and start our build by first unlocking permafrost bolts, then fragmentation rounds, followed by explosive grenade and armor piercing rounds. Ultimately, we will be taking off permafrost and frag rounds in exchange for galvanic shards, but we'll first need a level 5 uncut skill gem or higher in order to get the skill. For now, use permafrost to freeze ad groups and then fragmentation rounds to shatter them. For a single target, use armor piercing rounds to soften up any heavily armored enemies and then spam your explosive grenades. Pretty simple. While you're waiting for your grenades to come off cooldown, you can always mix in some permafrost to build freeze and then shatter to the frozen boss with frag rounds for some chonky DPS. As for gear starting off, I always just spin the slots with Finn for a crossbow with plus projectile skills right off the rip. Also keep checking back in on Renly every time you level up, as sometimes he'll be selling a juiced early game crossbow. And then for armor, I'm personally speccing into evasion for this build, which we'll need as much of as we can for when we choose our ascendancy in Act 2, but more on that later. For early game support gems, I would heavily recommend grabbing multi-shot 1 for explosive grenade first, which will beef up your AoE damage by adding 2 additional projectiles at the cost of 35% less overall damage and 20% less skill speed. Additionally, I would grab elemental armament 1, which will give us 20% more elemental attack damage. Explosive grenade is our Act 1 boss melter, so we really want to prioritize the DPS on that skill. For permafrost bolts, I grabbed Ice Bite 1, which will give our attacks 25% more cold damage for 5 seconds upon freezing an enemy. And for fragmentation rounds, I grabbed cold attunement so that we're gaining 25% of damage as extra cold damage while dealing 50% less fire and lightning damage. Now, as soon as you get a level 3 skill gem, you should definitely acquire flash grenade and slot that in, as it can be a great get out of jail free card when you find yourself being swarmed. For support gems here, I'm also putting multi-shot 1 as well as concentrated area so that we're dealing 30% more area damage at the cost of 50% less AoE. You should be getting this gem right around the time you're reaching Freythorn, where you'll get your first spirit gem. For this, I grabbed Herald of Thunder, and yes, it has been nerfed with the launch of 0.4, with GGG dropping the damage from 47 to 143% down to 40 to 122%. However, despite its damage nerf, in my opinion, I mean, it's still a pretty decent option for ad clear. I'll also be slotting in concentrated area as my support gem here. However, this is lower priority, and your other skills should definitely be put first when it comes to your support gem allocation this early on in the game. Now, unfortunately, Herald of Lightning is kind of useless right now until we kill the Executioner, unless you've got some electric damage on your crossbow. But once we do, we will actually get our first level 5 skill gem from Letus back in Clearfell, and from here you're going to want to cut galvanic shards. Now, this is where the ad clear actually starts to get somewhat decent. Whenever you have the support gem for it, go ahead and throw shock on here. This will give galvanic shards 100% more chance to shock, which will allow our Herald of Lightning to proc more since we'll be killing more shocked enemies. On top of that, I would grab lightning attunement for a flat 25% damage buff as extra lightning damage. Now, in my Geonor gameplay here, unfortunately, I 100% forgot to grab my tier 5 skill gem reward from Letus, so I'm not using galvanic shards. Do not be like me. Be better. Finally, here's a glance at my skill tree by the end of Act 1. Feel free to pause here if you're trying to copy my tree 1 for 1, but it's a pretty standard progression of just taking extra projectile damage, extra percentage armor and evasion, as well as some grenade cooldown nodes to help us with our explosive and flash grenade uptimes. Now, after crushing the furry's heart, the hooded one whisks us away to the fun, awesome, totally not horrible Act 2.
I'm gonna kill myself!
I'm sorry, I am a chronic Act 2 and 3 hater. It cannot be helped. Anyways, at this point, we're going to be making some skill gem swaps. You can go ahead and take off permafrost and frag rounds, because for our main ad clear now, we'll just be spamming galvanic shards and proccing Herald of Thunder. A few crossbow shots should now clear most of the less tanky swarms of enemies you go up against. If you want to keep flash grenade on, feel free to, but I ended up taking it off as I was finding myself not really using it all that much after getting my galvanic setup going. Keep on grinding through Act 2 until you find a level 7 skill gem, and from here, you're going to want to take Voltaic Grenade. This will immediately apply Electrocute to most rank and file adds and is also great for keeping bosses immobile while you unload explosive grenades into them. At this point, you definitely want to be looking out for any crossbows that are also dealing electric damage. Percent Fizz, flat physical damage, and plus level to projectile skills are also nice, but I'm really not focusing on getting the perfect weapon roll until endgame, so any combination of these mods is really solid honestly for Act 2. Also keep looking for high evasion pieces as you progress. This is honestly the last time I really mentioned gear, since this advice here also applies to Act 3 and 4. Just keep on replacing your gear with just better pieces that are gonna ultimately allow you to do more DPS and raise your evasion. Now at this point in your progression, you should have had a few level 2 support gems drop for you. I would highly recommend prioritizing making Explosive Grenade, Galvanic Shards, and Voltaic Grenade your first 3 linked skills once you get Lesser Jeweler's Orbs to start dropping. Since we use these 3 skills the most, it just makes sense to max them out as quickly as possible. On Explosive Grenade, I'm upgrading Multi-Shot 1 to 2, which will reduce our damage penalty to 25% instead of 35%, upgrading Elemental Armament 1 to 2, which will bump up our elemental damage to 25%, and finally I'll be tacking on Short Fuse 1 for our 3rd link, which will give our grenades 40% less detonation time. For Galvanic Shards, I'm adding on Elemental Armament 2, which will give us 25% more elemental damage to our attacks, and finally for Voltaic Grenade, I'll be taking Multi-Shot 1 or 2, depending on what your support gem availability looks like, as well as Short Fuse 1 and Lightning Attunement. If you have any leftover support gems at this point, feel free to spend them on what you see fit, but I've had possibly the worst luck ever on this Merc getting them to drop for me, so I just did not get that privilege. Now let's move on to our Ascendancy for this build. Go do Trials of Suck My Ass right before you do Jamenrah, as this will really help out with your survivability in this boss fight. We're going to be taking Witch Hunter here, and for our first 2 points, we'll be grabbing Obsessive Rituals, which will give us Sorcery Ward. Think of this as a means of just getting Energy Shield for our character, but it's only absorbing fire, cold, and lightning damage. Once we hit Act 3 and do our Trials of Chaos, we'll actually be able to absorb physical and chaos damage as well. This is actually a new change to point 4. You can go over to the patch notes and see that Ceremonial Ablution now instead grants Sorcery Ward, also protects against physical and chaos damage. Now, ultimately, Sorcery Ward scales with our evasion stat, which is why we want it as high as possible before the Jamenrah fight. Specifically, it states that it will absorb damage up to 30% of our armor and evasion rating. You'll see up in the top left just how much damage you're actually able to absorb before your Sorcery Ward will be broken. And once we've grabbed this, head on over to Jamenrah and spank that ass. I actually ended up throwing on Permafrost and Frag again for this fight, just since this dude straight up does not give a fuck about lightning damage on him. And finally, here's what our passive tree is looking like at the end of Act 2. We're moving towards the right from the middle of the tree here and grabbing some nodes to help with crossbow reload speed, overall grenade damage, and then increased evasion armor percentage to buff the amount of damage our Sorcery Ward can take. Moving on to Act 3. Right off the rip, we can actually go kill Root Dredge in Sandswept Marsh to get a guaranteed level 9 skill gem, which will allow us to unlock Stormblast bolts. This lets us shoot a bunch of electric tethers from our crossbow that will explode if hit with a detonator skill, aka our explosive grenades. I'm mainly using this to just chunk down boss health bars, but it's also nice for areas that might have like essence monsters. Pretty much just preemptively drop some Stormblast bolts on the area, free the essence mob, and then blow them all up with explosive grenades for a nice easy kill. This is actually the final new skill gem we'll be picking up for the axe, so from here on out, we're just upgrading our existing skills with Gem Cutters Prisms and higher tier support gems. When it comes to upgrading the quality of our skills, I would only upgrade Explosive Grenades and Galvanic Shards, as these are the only 2 skills I'll be keeping after Act 4, since I've got like an in-game build setup that I really want to try out. If you're at all interested in that, I should be dropping a build guide not too long after this video comes out. We'll see how long this takes to edit, but be sure to drop a sub so you don't miss it. Anyways, now that we're in Act 3, we'll be getting level 3 support gems to drop. If you're super lucky, unlike me, and get a Greater Jeweler's Orb to drop for you, I would throw it on Explosive Grenade and pick up Deliberation. This will give us 20% extra damage for our grenades at the cost of a 30% movement speed penalty while using that skill. Now, like I said, I was not so lucky, but if you are, again, this is what I would have picked up. At this point, I would also swap off Lightning Attunement on Galvanic Shards for Fork, which will allow our projectiles from supported skills to fork. However, projectiles will deal 30% less damage after forking. This is really huge for our ad clear, as our Galvanic Shards will just chain from enemy to enemy, so grab this as soon as you can. I'm also going to be taking Magnified Area 2 on Voltaic Grenade in exchange for Lightning Attunement. Voltaic Grenade is mainly being used for electrocution buildup, so I'm not really worried about losing a little damage here. This will give our Voltaic Grenades a 45% increased area of effect, which just means a higher chance for more enemies and packs to be electrocuted. For Stormblast Bolts, I'll be throwing on Elemental Armament 2 for 25% extra elemental damage, Elemental Focus for another 25% 25% damage buff to elemental damage, and lightning attunement for 25% extra lightning damage. Finally, if for some reason you've got extra spirit on your chest or amulet, I would grab Deadly Herald and put that on Herald of Thunder. This will allow our Herald to deal 30% increased damage. On the topic of spirit, head over to the Azak Bog when you're able to and kill the Bog Wedge to get you 30 more spirit. With this, we're going to be grabbing War Banner. This requires 200 glory to use and will give us 25% increased attack speed and attack damage, as well as 50% increased accuracy rating. I found this to be pretty convenient with boss melting in the axe, although later on I did eventually swap to Overwhelming Presence to allow me to apply shock to groups of ads easier. Ultimately though, it is up to you. Just take whichever one you feel like you'll get the most utility out of. At some point in the act, you'll need to do your Trial of Chaos as well, again, preferably before you go and fight Doriani. And upon clearing this, I ended up grabbing Ceremony Ablution, which we mentioned earlier, which will allow our Sorcery Word to also deflect physical and chaos damage. Now, if you're not playing hardcore and don't really care about dying, I would honestly recommend you grab Zealous Inquisition instead. This will give you a 10% chance for enemies you kill to explode, dealing 100% of their maximum life as physical damage. And the chance to explode is doubled against undead and demons. This is actually super nice for ad clear, as it'll pop whole packs of ads when it procs. For me though, this was a hardcore run and I was more focused on the survival aspect of my run, so that is why I grabbed Ceremonial Ablution instead. From here, you should be able to easily rinse Doriani and move on to Act 4. Finally, here's what my passive tree is looking like at the end of Act 3. We continued moving down the tree into some nodes that will give us some extra electrocution buildup, as well as extra damage against electrocuted enemies. On top of that, we also grabbed some herald damage, and then also back up towards the top of the tree, we're grabbing some two-handed weapon damage to further beef up our overall DPS. Alright guys, so at this point, we're really not changing much to the build. I thought I was going to need to go pretty deep into Act 4 in the interludes, but since this is more of like a build and how I use this build to clear the axe, I really don't feel like I need to go that much deeper, because this is pretty much the gist of the entire build. You spam Galvanic and let your Herald of Thunder do its thing, and then basically use Voltaic grenades to build up electrocution on boss enemies while spamming them with Stormblast bolts and explosive grenades. And that is just the overall flow all the way through Act 4 into the interludes. Outside of that, we'll just be grabbing better weapons and armor as they drop, and also upgrading our skills with better support gems as we get them. And if you want to see exactly what those are and copy my support gems and passive tree 1-to-1, I would just go check out my mobility guide, since everything past this point is like super minute tweaks and is not worth wasting your time. Like I said earlier though, this is by no means an in-game build, just something that's been really nice for leveling and getting to that point without dying. So as you're going through these acts, be sure to save any extra skill, support, and spirit gems, as you will need them to make some swaps once you hit mapping. Again, I will be making a video on this. Here's a quick little look at what I've gotten to so far. Herald of Ice is pretty disgusting this season, so I kind of wanted to make a build that took that into account. But yeah, if you do want to see this, I will have a build guide on this within about a week or so. Anyways guys, I really hope that this helps you, especially if you are a new player to the game who's coming in confused by the absolute sheer amount of info this game just dumps on you. I know a year ago when I first picked up Path of Exile for the very first time, I was just like absolutely blown away by just how much stuff there is in this game that you need to know. So yeah, I do hope this helped. If you've ever got any questions on this build or just want to chat, we're live over on Twitch about 4 to 5 days a week and would love to see you there. Thank you so much if you took time out of your day to make it to the end of this video, and I will see you in the next one.